My fiancée tried to quietly rewrite our prenup behind my back so she could take over my business. So I scrapped the whole thing and made one bold move that turned their greed into a hard dose of regret. I'm 34 years old, a guy just trying to make sense of this mess. And honestly, I've been carrying the weight of this for weeks. It's been eating away at me, and I need to finally get it off my chest. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that went down. Her name's Barbara, she's 29, and we'd been together for 3 solid years, engaged for about 8 months. Things felt pretty much perfect between us, at least until a couple months back when I started picking up on a weird shift. Let me give you some backstory first. I run a chain of organic grocery stores now, but it all started with one tiny shop in a rough neighborhood about a decade ago. Everyone around me thought I'd lost my mind trying to go up against the big-name super-Richardettes. But I had this dream, creating a place where people could actually afford high-quality, organic food without blowing their whole paycheck. Those early days? Man, they were brutal. I'm talking sleeping on a mattress in my office just to save on rent and keep the business afloat. Dealing with suppliers who didn't take me seriously, scrambling to fix broken fridges I couldn't afford to replace, and constantly trying to convince folks to give the scrappy little store a shot. But I put in the work, every single day. Eventually, that one shop grew into 2, then 5, and now we're running 12 stores across 3 different states. And I'm not saying all this to brag. I'm laying it out so you understand why what happened with Barbara rocked me so hard. When we first started getting serious about marriage, I was straight up with her. I wanted a prenup. It wasn't about not trusting her. It was about protecting the thing I built from the ground up. She seemed totally on board with it, too. She'd say things like, "I get it. You've poured your soul into this, and you're being really fair." She even told her friends that I was handling it respectfully. I did everything I could to make sure she felt secure. I opened a savings account in her name, gave her an emergency credit card, and made sure the prenup didn't just protect me. It had protections for her, too. I never wanted her to feel like she was trapped or left out in the cold if things ever went sideways. I wanted her to feel safe with or without me. But then things started to shift, real slow at first. She'd make little offhand comments about how married couples should share everything, or she'd send me links to these articles about couples splitting assets 50-50, even businesses. At the time, I brushed it off. Figured she was just feeling the normal pre-wedding nerves. But then the questions started. Not your usual, "How's business going?" kind of stuff. She started asking oddly specific things, profit margins, plans for expansion, staffing, logistics. Stuff she'd never shown interest in before. And she started hanging around more when I was on calls with my business partners, pretending to just chill but obviously listening in. Things got even stranger when she started saying she wanted to be part of the business. Now, Barbara comes from a social media Richardetting background, small fashion brands, mostly. Nothing wrong with that, but she's never once shown any real interest in grocery store operations. Suddenly she's talking about needing an office at our headquarters and pitching herself as the head of our social media strategy. And it wasn't just the business stuff. Her habits with money changed, too. She used to be really independent, always paid her share on dates, bought her own things. But recently, it was like a switch flipped. Everything started going on our shared credit card, fancy shopping trips, luxury spa days, pricey boutique workout classes. I mean, one day I saw a $500 charge from Nordstrom. When I brought it up, just trying to talk it through, she snapped and said, "Well, we're getting married, right? So what's yours is mine." I kept telling myself I was probably reading too much into it. Maybe she was just excited about the wedding. Maybe she genuinely wanted to be more involved. But deep down, something wasn't sitting right with me. And then last week happened. I was cleaning up some papers in my home office when I came across a copy of our prenup. Except it wasn't the original version we went over with our lawyers. It was completely different. This one had whole new sections, stuff about splitting profits, joint ownership of the business, even clauses that would give her half of everything down the line, including any new stores I might open up, even if we split after just a year. I must have read it 20 times, hoping I was misreading something. But no, this was a totally altered version of the agreement. And then I remembered Barbara had mentioned a while back that a lawyer friend of hers was reviewing the paperwork for her. Turns out her friend did more than just review it. In that moment, all I could think about was how the woman I fell in love with would never have done something like this. She used to be proud of what I'd built. She used to support me without question. Now, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I never really knew her at all. I sat there for what felt like forever, probably 2 hours, just trying to breathe, trying to calm down. I kept rereading the changes and it only got worse. She didn't just try to claim half of what I already had, she included future expansions and even a cut of online sales we haven't even launched yet. That's still in the planning phase. So I called her. Tried to keep my tone steady. She could probably tell something was up because she immediately asked if everything was okay. I just said, we need to go over some paperwork, and she told me she'd be there in an hour. That hour felt like the longest stretch of time in my life. I had both versions of the prenup laid out on my desk, the real one and the altered one. I also printed out my recent bank statements showing all the spending she'd racked up lately. When Barbara showed up that evening, she was wearing this sharp-looking blazer I'd never seen before. Later, I found out it was a $900 splurge from the week before. She walked in all smiles, kissed me like everything was totally normal. But the second her eyes landed on the papers spread across my desk, her whole vibe shifted. Just like that, the confidence drained right out of her face. I kept it calm at first. I picked up both versions of the prenup and simply asked, "Can you tell me why these two don't match?" She played it cool, tried to act clueless. Said she didn't know what I meant. So I broke it down for her section by section. I pointed out the new clauses she'd added, ones about profit sharing, future business growth, her getting a piece of it all, even in case of a divorce. And you won't believe what she said. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Oh, those? That's just standard protection. Anyone with common sense would include them in a prenup. Look, I've been running this business for a decade now. I know a lot of other store owners. Not a single one of them has a prenup that hands their spouse control over future business expansions. That's not standard, it's strategic. Strategic in a sneaky kind of way." I pointed to the section where she gave herself decision-making authority in the company. I asked her flat out, what exactly does she know about running a grocery chain? She immediately got defensive, saying she's been studying up and learning and that she deserved a voice in our future. But the truth is, Barbara's never stepped foot into the operations side of what I do. Her background's in social media editing for boutique fashion brands. She's great at posting Instagram stories about new dresses, sure. But that's a world apart from negotiating supplier contracts, managing inventory flow, and keeping perishable goods moving on time. She's never had to deal with a walk-in freezer breaking down in the middle of summer. Then she launched into this emotional monologue about how I clearly don't trust her and how she's just trying to protect herself. She even said, "What if you walk away after I've invested years into this marriage? I need to feel secure." I reminded her calmly that the original prenup already gave her plenty of security. We built in a generous settlement structure, one that scaled depending on how long we stayed married. She wouldn't be left high and dry, not even close. But apparently that wasn't cutting it for her anymore. She kept pushing this idea that modern marriages are all about equal partnerships. And look, I'm not against that at all. If we'd actually built the business together, I'd feel differently. But we didn't. She never once asked to learn the nuts and bolts of how things work. She never put in the late nights or dealt with staff no-shows or chased down invoices. Out of nowhere, she just wanted ownership like it was something she was owed. Things really started to unravel when I brought up her recent shopping sprees, $900 for a blazer, $1,200 for a wellness retreat, $2,000 at some designer boutique, all in the past few weeks. Her response? "Well, I need to look professional if I'm going to be part of the business." That's when I kind of snapped. Not yelling or anything, but the mask dropped. "Barbara," I said, "you're not part of the business. You never have been. Sneaking in changes to legal agreements doesn't make you a business partner." That's when the tears started. She said I was being mean and unfair. That she just wanted us to be real partners. Then she hit me with, "Why are you blowing up over a few small changes to the prenup?" Small changes? Trying to quietly rewrite a legal document so you can take half a man's livelihood isn't a small change. That's like remodeling someone's house while they're on vacation and calling it a little touch-up. The whole thing ended with her storming out of the house, saying she needed space to think and that I clearly didn't appreciate her. She's been crashing at her parents' place ever since. I spoke with my lawyer, and thankfully he confirmed those changes are completely invalid since I never signed off on them. But he also warned me to keep my guard up. He's concerned she might try to tamper with other documents before the wedding. Since that night, Barbara's been sending me a string of emotional texts, long ones, saying I'm being dramatic and unreasonable. One of them said, "I can't believe you're acting like this. After all we've been through and you're melting down over a few minor adjustments. I sat there staring at my phone. Trust doesn't work one way. How am I supposed to trust someone who rewrote a legal agreement behind my back? They're just small changes. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. And then came the kicker. Richard said every smart woman does this before marriage. At least someone's looking out for my best interests. I leaned back in my chair, ran a hand down my face. Richard. Of course. Her brother, he popped back into her life about 3 months ago. 3-time divorce can't hold a job longer than 6 months. Guy leaves a trail of bad decisions like breadcrumbs. Before I could even respond to that message, my office door suddenly burst open. Jessica, my assistant, came rushing in, face flushed and clearly flustered. I'm so sorry, sir. I told her you were in a meeting. Barbara was right behind her, eyes blazing, hair mess like she'd rushed over without thinking it through. Standing in the doorway looking like a storm in heels. Across from me, my biggest supplier slowly turned in his chair, raising his eyebrows in confusion. We need to talk, Barbara said, loud enough for her voice to bounce off the glass walls. I felt the blood drain from my face. Barbara, I'm in a meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, she shot back, not sounding sorry at all. Am I interrupting business? She practically spat the word. I turned to my client, who was already sliding his papers back into his briefcase. I apologize. Let's pick this up tomorrow. Once he stepped out and the door clicked shut behind him, I turned to Barbara. What the hell are you doing? You can't just barge in during a meeting like that. She tossed her purse onto the chair like she owned the place. So now I can't even show up at my future business? Then she dropped the line that made my jaw clench. Richard says I need to start asserting myself more. I looked her square in the eye and said, this isn't your enterprise, Barbara. And why are you taking career advice from Richard? He's never built anything that lasted. Don't you dare insult my brother, she snapped, jabbing a finger into my chest. He's been through divorces. He knows exactly how men like you behave. Men like me. I took a step back, stunned. What exactly does that mean? Oh, you know, she folded her arms, her voice dripping with contempt. Corporate guys who think they can buy and control everything. Richard warned me about guys like you. In that moment, I hardly recognized the woman standing before me, the one I thought I knew. Was this really Barbara? Richard says I should be added to every bank account before we say I do, she declared, leaning in. He said that's the only way to stop you from hiding money. I stared at her, trying to bridge the gap between the independent woman who once cheered on my dreams and this stranger consumed by paranoia. Barbara, I said gently, the original prenup already promises you a comfortable settlement. Why isn't that enough? Her eyes flashed. Comfortable? I'm not a charity case. I deserve half of everything. Richard says courts usually award wives that much. But you didn't help build this business, I replied, instantly regretting the bluntness. You've never set foot in an operations meeting here. I've supported you emotionally, she retorted, pacing like an animal in a cage. That counts for something. And once we're married, I'll be critical to this company. Critical how? I asked, disbelief creeping in. You've never managed inventory or negotiated supplier deals. I can learn, she choked out, her voice trembling. Richard says I'm perfectly capable of running any business. He says I should refuse to stay dependent on you. I slumped into my chair, utterly drained. Her tone sounded like Barbara's, but the words came from Richard. I tried one more time to reach her. Can we drop the Richard talk for a second? Why are you so threatened by my brother? She leaned across my desk, eyes narrowing. Because he's telling me how these situations usually play out. I'm not scared of Richard, I said, exasperated. I'm worried you're listening to someone who's never succeeded at anything. Silence stretched between us. Her face flushed scarlet, then purple. How dare you? She yanked her purse from the chair, hands shaking. Richard's only trying to protect me. You're just angry because he's finally standing up for me. She stormed toward the door, paused, and turned back with icy calm. Richard says I should document every bit of your controlling behavior, how you isolate me from my family. It'll all come in handy later. Then the door slammed shut behind her. I reached for my phone to call my lawyer. Before I could dial, he cut me off over speaker. Has Barbara's brother ever asked detailed questions about your corporate finances? My heart dropped. I remembered my accountant mentioning calls from a potential investor, someone asking strangely precise questions about our ownership structure and profit margins, someone who sounded a lot like Richard in hindsight. I glanced at the photo on my wall, Barbara and me on the beach last summer, her head thrown back in laughter at one of my terrible jokes. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now, that engagement ring I had spent months choosing felt like a weight pulling me under. Should I cancel the wedding? Confront Richard directly? Every choice lay coated in doubt. Then her mom called. This was the same woman who once told me how lucky Barbara was to have someone hardworking like me in her life. Now she sounded like Richard's mouthpiece. Her voice over the phone, "William, we need to discuss how you're treating Barbara." I bristled. "What do you mean?" "She's the one who tried to rewrite our prenup behind my back." "Richard explained it all," she insisted. "You're trying to control our daughter with an unfair agreement. Mrs. Anderson, the original prenup was equitable. Barbara was the one who altered it. But Richard says men like you use prenups to keep women powerless," she lectured. "Did you know his first wife walked away with nothing? He's only trying to prevent Barbara from making the same mistake." I swallowed hard. Richard's first marriage ended that way because he gambled away their savings and lost their home, hardly a fair comparison to my situation. Then came a text from Barbara's dad, the man who used to take me fishing. "Very disappointed in you, William. We thought you were different. Richard showed us the prenup you're forcing on Barbara, making her sign away all her rights. That's not who we raised her to be." I tried to explain that they had things backwards, that Barbara was the one who sneaked in changes, but they wouldn't hear it. In their eyes, I was proving Richard right by refusing to cave. The next morning, a group text popped up from Barbara's cousins, folks I'd spent holidays with and even hired at my stores. "We always knew something was off about you. Richard was right, you're just another greedy businessman. Barbara deserves better." My thumb hovered over the keyboard as I stared at the screen, the weight of their words pressing down on me. I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but I didn't know if it would make any difference. "You all remember when Richard borrowed $5,000 from your aunt last year for that can't-fail business idea? Ever see a dime of that money come back?" And just like that, they left the group chat. That was the moment I decided to dig deeper. Turns out Richard had been holding little family get-togethers without me. He'd been spinning his usual sob stories, talking about how every one of his failed marriages was the result of greedy, manipulative women who took everything. Which is a wild claim considering he never had anything to take. But the damage was done. He convinced Barbara's entire family that all successful business owners eventually turn selfish and heartless, that guys like me always leave their wives high and dry. And somehow he was using his own screw-ups as proof that Barbara needed to grab what she could before I supposedly turned on her. The worst part? Barbara seemed to buy it. I saw it all spill out on Facebook. She posted, "Funny how money makes people show their true colors. So grateful for my brother's wisdom. Some men just don't understand that marriage means sharing everything." I replied, "Does that include secretly rewriting legal agreements behind your partner's back?" Her response? She blocked me. That was my breaking point. I decided I needed to talk to Richard face to face. No texts, no games, just me and him. Found out he was holed up at an extended stay motel across town. I shot him a text asking to meet at the coffee shop down the block. He agreed without hesitation. I walked in and spotted him right away, corner table, arms stretched across the back of the booth like he already thought he'd won. That same smug expression like he was starring in some movie and I was just a side character. "Appreciate you meeting me," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He leaned back, grin never fading. "Hey there, future brother-in-law," he said, with that smug little pause. "Well, maybe not, given how things are going." "Cut the act, Richard," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I know what you've been up to." He raised his hands like I'd just accused him of stealing candy. "What are you talking about?" "I'm just making sure my sister's taken care of. By telling her to secretly change a legal contract? By pretending to be an investor and calling my office." He didn't even blink. Just leaned back and smirked wider, like I was proving his point. "Hey, a guy's got to do his homework," he said. "Somebody needs to look out for her future." I took a slow breath, trying to keep my cool. She had a future, Richard. A real one. She was independent, driven, building a career. Then you showed up with your war stories and suddenly she's throwing out legal clauses like she's been in corporate law her whole life. He sat forward, voice turning cold. "I'm teaching her how the real world works. You think you can just hoard your little empire and toss her some scraps if things don't go your way? The prenup was generous and fair. You know it was. Your little lawyer friend even looked it over." Something shifted in his eyes. The mask slipped. "Fair," he scoffed. "Please. I've seen your books. That chain of yours, it's a damn gold mine. Barbara deserves at least 75% for putting up with you." I froze. Coffee cup halfway to my mouth. "How do you see my company's numbers?" He blinked. That moment of hesitation gave him away. "Oh. Barbara might have left some stuff out," he mumbled. "And now we're getting to the real reason you're here," I said. "This isn't about protecting your sister. This is about you getting a seat at the table you never earned." His face flushed red. You don't know jack about my marriages. Those women used me. Used what, Richard? The debt? The maxed out cards? The string of failed startups you kept insisting were about to blow up. His fist slammed the table, rattling everything. The barista looked over nervously. You think you're better than me because your business caught a lucky break? I could run laps around your operation if I had the shot. Then came the moment everything clicked. He leaned in, low and bitter. Barbara already promised me a position at the company once she gets her share. There it was. I stared at him, the truth finally sitting clear in my mind. So that's what this is. You're not protecting her. You're using her to get yourself a paycheck. She's my sister, he snapped. Family sticks together. Not like you trying to keep her beneath you. The only one trying to take everything is you, I said. Does she even know what you're planning? He hesitated just long enough. Barbara knows I'll be a valuable part of the team, he finally said. I've got experience. Experience doing what? Blowing through other people's savings? His eyes went dark. You really think you're the good guy here? Wait until Barbara tells everyone how you screamed at her brother. How you threatened me. How you've been isolating her from her family. I reached into my pocket, calmly placed my phone on the table, and tapped the screen. You mean this conversation I've been recording? The color drained from his face. Then it came roaring back, red and angry. You can't record me without telling me. That's illegal. But I could already see it, the panic starting to edge into his eyes. He stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, he hissed. Barbara's never going to believe you over me. And when she gets her share, you'll be begging me for a job. He stormed out of the cafe, leaving the door swinging behind him. I hit send and forwarded the whole recording to my lawyer. The next morning, I got a text from Barbara. How dare you ambush my brother like that? Richard was right about you all along. You're just threatened because he understands business better than you ever will. I didn't respond. I forwarded that to my lawyer too, then waited. The day after that, Barbara showed up at my house without warning. She still had her key, walked in like she still lived there. I was working from home. I looked up and knew instantly this wasn't a talk. This was a showdown. She was furious about the recording, about the confrontation, but what struck me more than anything was how unrecognizable she'd become. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the Barbara I fell for. She wasn't even close. I tried showing Barbara the recording, Richard, in his own words, laying out his grand plan for a cushy position at my company once she got her share. But she wouldn't even listen. It was like she was in denial, locked in this bubble where facts didn't matter anymore. The more proof I laid out in front of her, the more she dug in, like facing the truth was some kind of threat. I played the clip anyway. Watched her face cycle through confusion, anger, guilt, and finally cold defiance. It was like watching someone wrestle with reality and lose. When I brought up the security footage video of Richard snooping through my office, digging through paperwork, taking photos of confidential business docs that she had been giving him, she didn't even deny it. Instead, she flipped the whole thing on me. Now I was the villain for having security cameras in my own office. Apparently, violating company confidentiality wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had the nerve to protect my business with basic security. In Barbara's mind, being engaged meant she already owned part of my life. That every file, every login, every account was fair game. Like we were already merged, legally, financially, everything. The hardest moment, the one that cut deepest, was when I tried to talk to her about how she'd changed. How different she'd become since Richard re-entered her life. Before all this, she never cared about grocery stores, never wanted to talk margins or logistics or suppliers. She supported me, sure, but from the sidelines, not the boardroom. And now here she was, saying she deserved 75% of what I built because of her emotional contribution. It wasn't her speaking anymore. Every sentence started with Richard says. She'd lost her voice somewhere along the way. And I couldn't pull her back. Then she started pulling out her phone, showing me messages she'd exchanged with divorce attorneys. Divorce attorneys. We weren't even married yet. While we were picking out flowers and tasting cakes, she'd been planning her exit strategy, plotting how to carve up my business and walk away with half. And somehow she didn't think any of that was wrong. In her mind, it was just being smart. Just protecting herself. She looked me dead in the eye and said, I need to make sure I'm secure. As if I hadn't been doing that from the very beginning. When she finally left that day, she wasn't the same person who had walked in. Hell, she wasn't the same woman I had proposed to. That version of Barbara, the one who laughed with me over takeout, who used to say she loved how grounded I was, that version was gone. She'd let Richard twist her into someone I couldn't recognize. Someone who saw our relationship not as a partnership but as a business opportunity. That night, the messages started flooding in from her family. All angry. All accusatory. Suddenly I was controlling. Now I was the guy with hidden cameras. All because I had the nerve to record the guy trying to gut my life from the inside. And then the final nail hit the coffin the next morning. I found out Barbara had met with one of my biggest competitors. A private lunch. No heads up. No explanation. But I got the call. Word travels fast in this business. That was it. There was no pretending anymore. No fixing this. This wasn't just a broken engagement. This was the full realization that the woman I loved had turned into someone else completely. Someone who saw me as an obstacle, not a partner. That night I made my decision. As much as it tore me up inside, I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't marry someone I didn't trust. Someone who could be so easily manipulated by her brother. Because if it wasn't Richard, someday it'd be someone else whispering in her ear. So I wrote the email. I CC'd my lawyer. Kept it professional, but clear. The wedding was officially canceled. The reason? Her unauthorized attempts to alter the prenup and her sharing of confidential business information with a competing firm. I also attached the audio file of Richard admitting to their plan. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Barbara was calling, sobbing, pleading, then flipping to threats like a switch. You can't just cancel a wedding like this, she cried. Richard says you owe me compensation for emotional distress. You're supposed to negotiate a settlement. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't say a word. I just hit the record button and let her talk. My lawyer said that was the best thing I could do, let her show who she really was. A few hours later, the text started changing tone. Apparently she'd vented to Richard again. Now she was playing tough. Fine. Keep your stupid company. But I'm keeping the ring. And I'm not moving out of the apartment until I'm ready. You owe me that much. Owe her? After everything she pulled? Then my mom called me. She was crying. Thought I'd broken Barbara's heart for no reason. How could you just walk away like this? She asked. She loves you. She just wanted to feel secure. I told her everything. But by then, Barbara had already gotten to her. Told her I was trying to leave her with nothing. That I refused to share. That I was the controlling one. Barbara told us about the prenup, my mom said. Richard explained it all to us, how those things work. That was the moment I realized I had to treat this like business. No more trying to win hearts or smooth things over. I packed up my laptop, drove to my parents' place, and sat them down. I showed them everything. The audio recording, the modified prenup, the emails, the security footage, all of it. My mom didn't say much after that. But Barbara, she wasn't done. Remember that emergency credit card I gave her last year? The one I said was for actual emergencies? She took that as her golden ticket and went full scorched earth. In 3 days, she racked up nearly $122,000 in charges. High-end shopping sprees, jewelry, spa packages, designer bags. She even booked a luxury resort stay. When the charges started pouring in, I called her right away. You've lost your mind, I said. That card was for emergencies, Barbara. She laughed. I deserve nice things after everything I've done for you, she said. I've invested years in this relationship. I'm not walking away empty-handed. I reminded her calmly that the card was never meant for this, that it was a backup for serious needs. She just chuckled and said, You should have been more specific about what counts as an emergency. That was the final straw. While she was still on the line, I pulled up the bank app and hit cancel on the card. No warning, no debate, just done. She went silent for half a beat, and then lost it, screaming about how I was ruining her life, demanding to know how I could do this to her after everything. But by then, I was done being her safety net, done funding her fantasy. My lawyer says we'll get the ring back. It's considered a conditional gift in our state, tied to the promise of marriage. As for the apartment, that'll be trickier. Tenant laws can get murky, even if she's not on the lease. Everything felt like it was falling apart. My head was spinning, and all I wanted was for the nightmare to just stop. I didn't care how. I just needed it to be over. But then, a couple of weeks after the breakup, things took another sharp turn. Barbara's sister, Sarah, had been helping Richard with some job applications. Yeah, apparently even scammers need a resume. And while she was digging through his stuff, she came across something on his laptop that stopped her cold. It wasn't a resume. It was a full-blown plan, a step-by-step breakdown of how he'd use Barbara to scam me. We're talking detailed spreadsheets, timelines, divorce strategies, even projections for how much money he expected to squeeze out of my business. It was like reading the script for some low-budget con artist thriller, except this one was real and I was the target. Sarah brought everything to their parents first. Turns out Richard had been plotting this long before he even moved back into town. He'd done his homework, looked into my business history, singled out which of my store locations pulled in the most revenue, and even made notes about which family members he'd need to win over first. The guy had mapped out the entire scheme. Barbara wasn't the mastermind. She was his pawn, and he'd been pulling her strings for months. But it got worse. Sarah found text threads between Richard and some guy posing as a lawyer, completely fake, where they were discussing how to manipulate Barbara. There were lines in those texts that made my stomach turn. She's too trusting. This will be easy. Once she's married, we'll push for majority control. Richard had even promised the fake lawyer a cut of whatever money they managed to pull from me. It was like watching someone scheme a robbery and brag about it in real time. When Barbara saw all of it, when it finally hit her, something in her cracked. Sarah told me she stayed in her room for 3 straight days, just reading through the messages and documents. All the stories Richard had told about how his ex-wives took everything from him, total fiction. The truth was they left him because he tried scamming their families too. Then last week, I got a call from security at my office. Barbara was in the parking lot, crying. They didn't know what to do, so they called me. When I went down, I barely recognized her. She looked worn out, like she hadn't slept in days. She was shaking, tears running down her face, begging me to talk. She kept saying she didn't know what Richard was doing, that she was sorry, that she'd made a huge mistake. And for a moment I did feel something, maybe not love, but sadness. Grief even, for what we could have been. Then she said, "I've learned my lesson. I'm ready to do the prenup exactly like we originally agreed. I won't ask for anything from the business." That's when it clicked for me. She still didn't get it. This was never just about the prenup anymore. This was about trust, about character, about who she really was underneath all the noise. I told her flat out, "Barbara, you didn't just try to take my business. You gave private information to my competitors. You maxed out a card meant for emergencies. You tried to manipulate my family. And for what? Some twisted plan your brother cooked up." She sobbed harder and said she was just scared. That Richard convinced her every successful man was hiding assets and she needed to act first or end up like his ex-wives. She said she really thought she was protecting herself. But then she said something that sealed it for me. "But I gave up so much for you. I deserve another chance." I looked at her and asked, "What exactly did you give up, Barbara? A part-time job you couldn't stand? An apartment you could barely keep up with? Or was it just the opportunity to scam someone else?" She didn't have an answer. She left shortly after, but the texts didn't stop. Day after day, I got these guilt-laced messages. "Let's start fresh. I still love you. I'll prove to you that I can be trusted again." Sarah told me Barbara's been going around saying she's grown from all this, that she's learned her lesson. Maybe she has, but it's not my job to find out. The more she tried to reel me back in, the more I felt sick just thinking about it. Honestly, it'd almost be sad if she wasn't still working angles. Yesterday, my lawyer got a call from her new attorney. They were trying to claim emotional damages from the broken engagement. Didn't last long. As soon as my lawyer showed them Richard's notebook, the fake prenup edits, and the messages outlining the scam, they dropped the case immediately. And as for Richard, he's now facing charges for corporate espionage. Turns out he really did try to sell my business data to competitors. Even reached out to one of them directly, offering insider information in exchange for a cut of future profits. Barbara cut him off completely. But honestly, it doesn't change what she did. Yeah, maybe Richard manipulated her, but she went along with it. Willingly. Right up until the moment she got caught. I've moved on now. Completely. I've overhauled my company's security protocols, upgraded our systems, locked everything down. And personally, I'm a whole lot more careful about who I let into my world these days. If this whole disaster taught me anything, it's this. Sometimes people don't change into someone else, they just finally show you who they've been all along.